Hello, we're back with part two, Worlds North and South, the South. And here we have our kind of classic image of the South at this time, the antebellum South, the Civil War, before the Civil War. Very little industry. We see one little steamboat over here, but we see a cotton field, a cotton plantation. Not much industry. One building here that has a smokestack, but it's not even running in this picture. And that's sort of our classic picture of the South before the Civil War. What do we mean by the South? The South, we mean slave states. Okay? Our pinkish purple here, these are our slave states before the Civil War. And overwhelmingly agriculture. Agriculture based on cash crops for export. The big ones, cotton and tobacco, but even things like rice and indigo are things that you're going to grow and then sell overseas. A little bit, very little bit of industry or mining here in what we call like the Upper South, in places like Kentucky or Virginia. But for the most part, we're talking about agriculture for export. We're talking about cash crops. And the big one is going to be cotton, king cotton. Cotton, for years, ancient Egyptians grew cotton. We have 7,000 years worth of humans growing cotton, and the American South was perfect for it. It's warm enough, hot enough, wet enough, long enough in the year to grow cotton. The problem with cotton is the seeds. You ever brush your hair, and as you're brushing your hair, you hit a knot? Yes, clearly it does not happen with me. I have nice straight hair, but you get a knot in your hair. That's the seeds in the cotton. Think of that as you run through. Yeah, all of those little seeds needed to be picked out by hand. We got a couple of good videos in there attached to the Google Classroom today on how they had to be picked apart. And this little gadget, invented by a New England school teacher who was down working as a tutor for a wealthy plantation family down in the South, came up with this, what they call the cotton gin. That's short for cotton engine. This little machine that's going to separate the seeds from the cotton fibers, which is the part you wanted. Got a quick little video. We'll watch a minute of it here. And kind of shows how it works. So in this case,
for thousands of years, the only way to separate cotton seeds from
the only way to do it was to pick it apart by hand, was to literally, and this would take a slave all day, one full work day to deal with 1 pound of cotton. And now all of a sudden we have this fairly simple machine. This is supposed to be Eli Whitney here. And you feed the cotton in one side, and you crank the handle, and the seeds come out one side, and the raw cotton comes out. Here he is cranking away, and all of a sudden it separates the seeds from the cotton fiber. There he is. He's feeding in more cotton. And there's our clean cotton coming out the other side, and the seeds on the other side. And so it made cotton become the big crop in the South. You were kind of a fool if you could grow cotton and you didn't grow cotton. It was that profitable. Think about it. Almost everything we wear is made from cotton. Look at what you're wearing right now as you watch the video. Look around. Almost everything you're wearing is made out of cotton. All of that stuff they were making up in the Lowell girls in those mills largely was cotton, right? Was cotton fiber turned into cloth. So America had cheap cotton. The real problem with American cotton becoming so cheap is that it led to an increase in slavery. And it's tough to see on these, but as cotton production goes up in the 1800s. Along with it goes the number of slaves. Again, you get the PowerPoint with the Google Classroom. So as they go together, as more and more cotton is being developed, as more and more land is put into production, more and more slaves are being called for in the American South. Slave seed and soil. If you wanted to make money in the South, you got yourself more slaves, you got yourself more seed, you got yourself more land, more soil. Okay? If you lived in the North and you had some money to invest, maybe you built yourself a textile mill. Maybe you got into the shipping industry, you got into manufacturing. If you lived in the South and you wanted to make your fortune, you wanted to make it in cotton. And on this map, when you look at it on the PowerPoint, we see these arrows. As cotton is really harsh on the soil. It sort of sucks all the nutrients, all the good stuff out of the soil. They need to keep moving around. They need more and more and more land to cultivate cotton, to grow cotton. And they want to keep moving it west. So we add slave states like Texas. We add places like Arkansas and Louisiana, largely so that they can expand slavery there and continue growing more and more cotton. And really, in some places, great fortunes were made. If we look at it, we had at the top of this pyramid, we have this small group of wealthy plantation owners. Think of the guys like Andrew Jackson. They own a small group of people at the top of that pyramid, but they have most of the wealth and most of the power in the South. Most Southern families owned 0 slaves. If they owned any, they own a couple. They own 1 or 2. That's this little chart down here. I'll tell you about that. And then by the time of the Civil War, by the time we get to 1860, 1 in 3, 1/3 of the population of the South is slaves. Tells you how big a deal this was. In some states, it's an even higher percentage than that. But becomes the big deal. Becomes the big thing. There was other things that the North and the South argue about. There were different places. They had different kinds of people. They fought about the tariff. The one big thing that made them different places was slavery. Okay? And as we look at images like this, and you'll see them in videos that I'll attach to this. It's tough to see right here, but you can see it when you look at the PowerPoint. We see these guys. He's got marks, both of these guys. And there's lots of pictures like this taken around the time of the Civil War, really to document the horrors of slavery. They're scars. They're scars from repeated whippings over this man's lifetime. And the big thing that we need to remember is that, sure, while physical punishment from parent to child, from husband to wife, from employer-employee, was not unusual in the 1800s, well into the 1900s, this would never have been done to a child by a parent. This would never have been done by a husband to a wife. No, the community would not have tolerated. An uncle, a grandparent, somebody would have stepped in and stopped it. The reason this was tolerated is because both legally and figuratively, they were not seen as fully human. I think we talked about the old example of the horse and the zebra, how they're really similar animals, but they're not the same. That's often how supporters of slavery saw people of African descent, whether they had been born and raised here in America or not. Even Thomas Jefferson, Mr. All men are created equal, didn't see them as fully human. They saw them as close to human, but something different, almost like a different species. As awful as that sounds today. That thinking continued well into the 20th century, and modern science now proves to us what nonsense that is thinking. But the thinking was there in the 1800s. So that's really what makes something as nasty as this possible. We talk about it more in some of the videos that I'll include with this post. And really, America in some ways is still digging out from under this. That we still haven't quite healed the wounds that slavery created in our nation. So that's going to be your job as a generation. We keep getting a little closer. And the debate over what to do about slavery in the West. We did the Missouri Compromise a while back. In the next chapter, we get into the Compromise of 1850 and the Kansas-Nebraska Act. We'll hear about this guy, Dred Scott, and ultimately the election of Abe Lincoln. But what to do about slavery in the West is going to really tear the country apart and ultimately lead to civil war, which we will talk about next week. All right. See you on Thursday for our live lesson.